Hi, I'm Colin.
And I'm Phil.
We're the hosts of Science Fiction 101.
It's a show which gets to the heart of science fiction. Books, films, TV. We've covered Star Trek,
Doctor Who,
Star Wars.
We love to explore the past, present, and future of science fiction.
And we'd love for you to join us
on Science Fiction 101.
Hi, Colin.
Hi, Phil.
Here we are again. We've got all sorts of things going on in today's episode. You will hear mention of 2001, Planet of the Apes, Oppenheimer. We have a quiz coming up. Oh, and we have the second part of our interview with Robert J. Sawyer, the award-winning science fiction author. And, of course, we have our usual romp through the past, present and future of science fiction. Let's go first to the second instalment of our interview with Rob Sawyer. Now, if you were listening last time, you heard us talk about The Downloaded, which is Rob's new book. But this interview is more the tangential material, where we asked Rob about other things, and we sometimes went down a rabbit hole of different subjects. I particularly wanted to talk to Rob about his previous novel, which is the Oppenheimer alternative, quite an ingenious science fiction novel. But we found the discussion turned to adaptation, historical accuracy, Planet of the Apes, you name it. So let's hear the second part of the interview now. I saw Battle for the Planet of the Apes on first release.
I was one before you. Conquest was the first one that I saw, the fourth, in a theater at first release, and then Battle, the final one, when first release. The others I had not seen except on TV. But I'll tell you how much of a Planet of the Apes fan I am. So yesterday, as we record this, or this week at least as we record this, was the 56th anniversary of the first release of Planet of the Apes. But in the 50th anniversary, 1968, it came out, 2018 was the 50th anniversary. I flew all the way to Los Angeles just to watch a movie from Toronto. I got tickets, flew down for the 50th anniversary screening at the wonderful theater they have at the University of Southern California Film School. And they got the surviving special effects makeups people, William Kreber, who was the art director, designed Taylor's spaceship, designed Ape City. It also designed the Jupiter 2 for Lost in Space, the flying sub for Voyage to the Bottomless Sea. They were all there, and I was, a big effing deal. So I contacted the film school and said, I'm going to fly down. They reserved me seats. Actually reserved seats for my companion that night, who was Chase Masterson, an actress from Star Trek, who was a friend of mine, who had never seen Planet of the Apes, and no one had ever spoiled the ending for her. It was what a treat to sit watching it 50 years after it had come out with this intelligent, woman sitting next to me who has had a career made out of science fiction, having been a recurring semi-regular on Deep Space Nine, and watch her just go, oh my God, when Taylor sees, the Statue of Liberty at the end, and completely see it, how it was vicariously sitting next to her, how it was for me and everybody else the first time we saw it a half century ago. But absolutely loved that film, and just flew down. I think I was there overnight and flew back the next day, and it, cost me, hundreds and hundreds of dollars to go see the film on the big screen again. I had subsequently seen it. Luckily, we had a great film theater here in Toronto that did 70 millimeter showings of films. It did a revival science fiction series, but to see it in a pristine, restored print with William Kreber and, Dan Strepek, one of the makeup artists, John Chambers, long since deceased at that point, and Lou Wagner, who had played Lucius, Zira and Cornelius's nephew in the first movie. Just what an experience.
Wow.
Even if that was the only thing that you'd done in your life, Rob, that would be awesome.
It was, that's right, and life is, I have actually a screen capture of this. Captain Pike from Strange New Worlds, the series, where he says in the first episode, because he's, facing his mortality, and he comes to the epiphany that until its last moment, life is to be worn gloriously, because until its end, it's what we make it. What a brilliant summation. My own version of that, when I was much younger, I decided that I would formulate my life philosophy, and it was three words: minimize deathbed regrets. And I wanted to, when I die, which hopefully will be a long time from now, but even 20, 30, 40 years ago, when I first formulated that, I didn't want to be lying there thinking, I wish I'd done this. I should have done that. No, I'm going to grasp the opportunities and do it. They were showing one of my two favorite science fiction films on the big screen with some of the original people who made it. Hell yes, I'm going to go. I was lucky enough a few years later. No, I guess it was the same year, the 50th anniversary year. Doug Trumbull was here in Toronto, and we have the Toronto International Film Festival, one of the great film festivals, has its own dedicated theaters. And we had another 70 millimeter restored print showing, with Doug doing a lecture immediately following the film about how the film was made. Oh my God, just wonderful.
Are we going to see any more of your work on the screen, do you think? I mean, we've spoken about Flash Forward. But,
we try constantly. We came so close a little while ago. We had actually a deal at Sony Pictures Television. Ann Kofel Saunders, who was the #2 writer on The Boys, was a #2 to the showrunner Michelle Paradis on last season of Star Trek Discovery. Had written a pilot based on my novel Rollback, and the pilot, the script was bought and everything, commissioned by Sony Pictures Television. So close, and then they changed their mind. We came close again, Anne and I, and a great team of setting up Hominids, my Hugo Award winner. Right now, I'm out pounding the pavement with a producer here in Toronto, where we had previously collaborated on a TV series called Charlie Jade that came and went 20 years ago, on adapting my novel Red Planet Blues. We've got constantly trying, and I look back at it and I think I hit the jackpot once. I got a TV series made me a lot of money, sold me a lot of books, and was one of the peak experiences of my life. Flash Forward. It's streaming now on various services. I think it's on Disney Plus in the US at the moment. And that's more than most authors ever get. There has never been an adaptation filmed for movies of an Arthur C. Clarke book. 2001 doesn't count because he wrote the book simultaneously. There was a Sci-Fi Channel miniseries eventually made of Childhood's End. And that's it. That's all, nothing. Until Foundation, just recently, there had never been a big budget film based on Isaac Asimov's work. You'll say, but what about I, Robot? And I will tell you for a fact that I, Robot was a screenplay that was written entirely separately from the Asimov's universe, and an 11th hour studio decision licensed Asimov's name and title because they thought it would be good marketing. It has nothing at all to do with Asimov's work. The most famous adaptation of Heinlein is Starship Troopers, and it's a satire of Heinlein's novel Starship Troopers, not a faithful adaptation, but a satire of it. So, yeah, I'd love to see it constantly. And Flash Forward, as my Hollywood agent said to me, you're a lucky man, Rob, because all of the success of Flash Forward, the big ideas, the brilliance of the concept, that sticks to you. And all of the failures of it, whatever they were, stick to the people who were responsible for the adaptation. So still, whenever I go to Los Angeles, and I'm going to Los Angeles again in 2 weeks, I can get any meeting I want. I've had meetings at Marvel. I've had meetings at Netflix, at Amazon Studios, at NBC, ABC, you name it. They all remember Flash Forward. I get in the door, and I get to make my pitch. But it's 1 in 10,000 things that are pitched that get made. We came so close so many times. Triggers, we had an Academy Award-winning screenwriter attached to a Triggers adaptation. And as I say, I was out pitching with Bill Shatner. One hopes that something will happen again, but I can't be greedy. I have so many great, great friends. My great friend Robert Charles Wilson lives here in the Greater Toronto area. Also a Best Novel Hugo Award winner for his novel Spin. Nothing of his has ever been adapted. And he's, brilliant, brilliant writer. And he came close. He tells the story of the time he picked up his phone one morning. He goes, hello? He goes, hello, my name is Leonard Nimoy. And it was Leonard Nimoy who was
Wow.
calling up to option one of his books, right? And never got made, but Nimoy had fallen in love with one of Bob's novels. So, we all hope that it'll happen again. But if it doesn't happen again, that's okay. You know, I am a novelist first and foremost. You asked me at the outset, Phil, maybe we're getting close to a closer, as we call it in the biz here, because you bring it all back home. You asked me at the outset, which is the real version of the downloaded, the version that stars Brendan Fraser or the version that's printed on Dead Trees. And in my heart of hearts, it's the version that's on Dead Trees. And when people say, and they did often about Flash Forward, which was a fairly liberal adaptation of my novel, how could you let them do that to your book? My answer is always this: I didn't let them do anything to my book. My book is right here. The downloaded is coming out next month, May 7th. I'm writing my next book after that. I've got lots of other books. If I'd wanted to be a screenwriter, and I'm a member of the Writers Guild of America, the Writers Guild of Canada. I've written, commissioned feature film screenplays. I've written for television, including for Flash Forward. But if that's what I wanted to do, have my work on the screen, I'm a dual U.S. Canadian citizen. I could move to Hollywood in a heartbeat. I could be doing this. This is what I want to do. I want to write for print. This is my art form. If other people adapt it and send me, huge checks for the rights to adapt it, so much the better. It keeps me in Star Trek action figures and Planet of the Apes collectibles. But the goal is I'm not writing things as treatments to eventually be converted into movies. This was the knock against Crichton in his later novels, that they were so cursorily written, so sketchily fleshed out, that they really were just calling cards to Hollywood studios, because that's what he had his ultimate goal of, Jurassic Park. Yeah, it's a novel, but it was really supposed to be a film. And that's not me. That's not me. I am Robert J. Sawyer, science fiction novelist. That's the 6 things you have to put on my grave. 6, including the middle initial, because without the middle initial, I have a Google alert on Robert Sawyer, and that guy gets into trouble all the time. DUIs, or drink driving, as you'd call it in the UK. Deadbeat dads who are, delinquent on child support. All that kind of stuff comes in constantly. Robert Sawyer is nobody, but Robert J. Sawyer is the science fiction writer. So on my gravestone, Robert J. Sawyer, he wrote books. That's all you need.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
So, coming up, you have a tour of Canada, all the parts of Canada, including South Dakota. And you just mentioned you're working on a new novel. Can you tell us about those things, please?
Sure. I am so fortunate to be a Canadian writer and a Canadian science fiction writer. I was asked just recently at the International Conference on the Fantastic and the Arts in Florida, sitting next at a luncheon with a fellow Hugo Award winner. And he said, do you write full time? I said, yeah, I've written full time. What is it? My first novel came out 34 years ago, and I've been a full-time freelance writer for 44 years. I'd like to do that. Why can't he do that? Because he lives in the United States and he has to have a job to have health care. I never had to do that. You'll understand this, Phil. You never had to do this. I was able to, I might not eat well that week, but I never had to be tied to a 9-to-5 job. So, I got to get whatever that magic number is, 20,000 hours of work in to become an expert on something when I was a kid in my 20s, because I could write full time in my 20s. And also in Canada, we're a small country. We're only just 40 million people, spread across the second largest physical country in the world. Russia's bigger. We're the second largest. So we don't subdivide in Canada the way they do in the United States. If you're a science fiction writer, you're stuck at science fiction conventions. You never get to go to literary conferences. You never get to go to general literary festivals. In Canada, we're too few. So we don't subdivide. So I have a book tour coming up across Canada. Some of it's at bookstores, but much of it is at mainstream literary festivals, where they will have me and mystery writers and poets indigenous storytellers who have an oral tradition, and they will bring in, headliners, including Booker Prize winners and Nobel literature laureates at these festivals. And I get to go to them because I'm in Canada, and they don't say we're just Canadian literature is this one thing that has everybody in the same bucket, instead of us all my colleagues in the States being subdivided like an ice cube tray, where you're in the science fiction one. You can't be over here. You can't be at this literary festival because you write genre. So yeah, I've got a great cross Canada book tour coming up, and one festival book so far in the States, South Dakota Festival of Books. But we're working on booking more in the States, but that's a harder sell. They tend to be a little more looking down on genre at most literary festivals in the States. I love it. It's energizing to me to get out and actually meet readers. I don't read online reviews. I never look at my Amazon reviews. I never look at my Goodreads reviews because they're static. They're what somebody thought. You guys reviewed this, the downloaded in a previous episode. Forgive me, but I'm not going to listen, right? It's not interactive. But if you want to sit down and talk to me at a literary festival, or as we're doing now, and say, well, I like this, I didn't like this, and I'll say, well, you're incredibly insightful in the first part, and on the second part, I'm sorry it went over your head. I'm more than happy to do that to your face, right? So, yeah, I love, love, love that we have this literary community in Canada that has embraced me from day one, with never any of that snootiness that you see in the United States of looking down on genre writers, science fiction, fantasy, romance, horror, the few that are left doing Western mystery. So,
When you did your previous novel, The Oppenheimer Alternative, it starts out reading like a historical. Well, it reads like a biography, a kind of a dramatized biography of real people.
A better dramatized biography than Christopher Nolan did. Yes,
Well,
it does read like that.
We'll come to that in a minute. But it then somehow shifts into being science fiction. Is that related to this not being categorizable in Canada that you were talking about?
Yeah, I don't believe in genre barriers. And the Oppenheimer story is so fascinating and by the way, I wrote the Oppenheimer alternative before Christopher Nolan had announced that he was making a movie. I did have my book read in manuscript by Marty Sherwin, who was co-author with Kai Bird of American Prometheus, the biography of J. Robert Oppenheimer that Nolan did adapt. And Marty gave me a great blurb that's on the cover of the book, The Oppenheimer Alternative. But I had no idea. Nobody knew. I don't even think Marty knew at that point that Nolan was going to option to make make a movie out of his book. In any event, yeah, I just was captivated by Oppenheimer, but even more so he was kind of the catalyst of the Manhattan Project. He was surrounded by this incredible cast of characters, Richard Feynman and Leo Szilard and Enrico Fermi and Hans Bethe and Albert Einstein. And I was stunned in Nolan's film adaptation that, Feynman is there if you look for him. He's in the background of one scene. You see a guy playing bongos in the background with no dialogue. That's the sum total of Richard Feynman, one of the most eccentric and brilliant Nobel laureates ever in Nolan's film. But Feynman is a fully fleshed out character in my novel. Leo Szilard, virtually invisible in Nolan's film, but Szilard is such an amazingly eccentric character in my novel. So I honestly thought that Nolan had been handed a gift in the Manhattan Project cast of characters and his single-minded obsession of showing us everything from brooding Cillian Murphy's point of view with occasional flashes of Florence Pugh's breasts was an unbelievably botched way of approaching what could have been a much richer story. Now, Oppenheimer in and of himself is good, story material, but the only thing that really worked for me in Nolan's film, and as I said when I came out of the film, I said to my wife, this film is going to be nominated for a lot of Academy Awards. There's only one it deserves, Robert Downey Jr., Best Supporting Actor for Louis Strauss. knocked it out of the park. It was the only performance in the film that I thought was nuanced, subtle, and mercurial, that actually had an arc that changed over the course of the film. Of course, I knew that Downey was the villain from frame one because I knew the story. But those who didn't know the story, it's a really good bit of misdirection where you think he's Oppenheimer's champion. And only as it develops across the storylines do we discover that he's actually out to get Oppenheimer. And that said, Nolan manufactures this complete crap opening, entirely fictitious scene with Oppenheimer, Louis Strauss, the Robert Downey Jr. character, and Einstein at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. Never happened. Oppenheimer did not snub Louis Strauss there and plant a seed of resentment. That's entirely fictitious. The seed of resentment came about when Oppenheimer humiliated him when he said, that isotopes are somewhere, they're more important than, less important than bombs, more important than vitamins, somewhere in the middle, blah, blah, blah. Humiliated him there. But Nolan didn't trust the richness of the actual historical record. And I came out gnashing my teeth at all the times where he felt, oh, yeah, okay, he's read Sid Field's book on screenplay. He's taken Robert McKee's story seminar. He knows what he has to hit to make this mass consumable, rather than saying, oh, my God, the riches of the real story were so there for the taking. So you talk about, Phil, that it starts out, the Oppenheimer alternative, with a great fidelity to the material. And then there's a point, as there is in any alternate history, where it hinges off. And in the material that I wrote, and even in the hinge off, I don't call the Oppenheimer alternative an alternate history. I call it a secret history of the Manhattan Project. There is nothing in the narrative, even the science fictional parts, that is contradicted by what's in the actual historical record. And indeed, I took great joy in finding chapter head quotations that support my narrative. For instance, Oppie really was asked by a college student at a lecture latest, so the explosion at Trinity, that was the first atomic bomb explosion, was it? And Oppie says, yes, well, in modern times. Boom! What a great line that Oppenheimer actually said, and it actually supports my narrative in the Oppenheimer alternative. And there's 4 or 5 of those wonderful lines that are absolutely true chapter head quotations. And any dialogue that I have in the novel that is recorded in the historical record, I use the real version of the Oppenheimer trying to poison his tutor Blackett with an apple story, not this made-up crap of Oppie diving in and grabbing the apple out of Blackett's hand that Nolan just made up of whole cloth because he decided he needed a beat at that moment that he could make filmic instead of what really actually happened, which was much more dramatic. And also, he doesn't even get into Oppenheimer's, sexual obsession with Blackett. I mean, Oppenheimer was spurned as not even aware himself at that stage in his life that he was bisexual, but had completely been smitten with his tutor at the Cavendish Laboratory and went insane, literally insane enough to try to poison the man when he was spurned in his advances, which he didn't even fumblingly, with his, not clear what was going on in his head, understood as being advances. So all of that richness was there, and Nolan said, nope, time for more of Florence Pugh's breasts. Let's cut away to those for a few minutes.
So given how many people read books versus, watch movies and television, do you think there's a danger in making these, alternate history biographies where everyone will say, well, I watched Oppenheimer, so I know who he is, but not really know who he is?
I mean, my alternate history, I think, it's a great science fiction novel. I mean, it's got some of the best reviews of my life. I don't think there's a danger in people learning their history from reading alternate history. The genre is pretty clearly identified. And, at the end of the Oppenheimer alternative, there is my bibliography of sources, of which there were hundreds for the novel. There also is, as it says in the about the author in the print book and on my website, there's a pointer to it. Go to my website. There is, under the Oppenheimer alternative, what's fact and what's fiction, broken down moment by moment through the entire novel. And of course, I mean, the principal sources, I used a lot of the primary sources that the great biographers use. So the transcript of the Oppenheimer security hearing, for instance, which is, eminently available. Anybody can get that online and read it. And also the biographies, Martin Sherwin and Kai Bird's American Prometheus. And as I say, I got to know Marty. Richard Rhodes, he's a Facebook friend now, who wrote The Making of the Atomic Bomb, which won the Pulitzer Prize. Priscilla McMillan is no longer with us, but she wrote The Ruin of J. Robert Oppenheimer, another seminal source for my work. So, the primary nonfiction sources are there, but I think most people understand the difference between walking into the science fiction section of the bookstore and the biography section of the bookstore. The danger is when then they do a biopic like Oppenheimer and then manufacture stuff that is contrafactual and pawn that off as historical reality. I don't have any compunctions about deviating from what probably happened, although not able to be contradicted in my narrative in the Oppenheimer alternative. I think Christopher Nolan has a lot to answer for making up out of whole cloth events from Oppenheimer's life that were unnecessary and contrary to what actually had happened, and out of Louis Strauss's life, out of Albert Einstein's life, and so on and so forth. Oppenheimer never recited the Bhagavad Gita to his mistress, Jean Tatlock, who's the Florence Pugh character. They most assertedly never did it while they were both naked. I have a friend who is devoutly Hindu who was enormously offended, as were many Hindus, by Christopher Nolan's manufacture of a scene where holy Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, is being read as sexual foreplay between two on-screen full frontal nude characters. And they have a real point because there is no historical veracity for that. It was Nolan deciding to be a titillator rather than a chronicler. And notice the wordplay there.
Yeah.
Did you ever see the film First Man?
I have not seen First Man, the Neil Armstrong biography. And of course, it's based on the book of the same title.
Yeah, yeah. There's one scene in that. I won't spoil it for you, but there's one scene in that which kind of presents as fact something which is purely speculation and probably not true.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it'd be interesting when you do see that film.
It's not the scene where he says, when that kid on the next door is on the moon, that's when you'll get, or something like that.
No, it's not that scene.
No, okay. There's a famous meme, an internet meme about that, which is dirty. So I won't go into it. But anyways,
right.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting when you do get to see that film. Be interesting to know what your take is.
I have it on 4K disc. I will watch it.
Yeah, it is quite good. It's quite good.
I think I could talk to Rob for an awfully long time because this has been so much fun. How often do you get to sit and talk to a multiple award winner with all the experiences that Rob has and everything?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I enjoyed the chat. I mean, interactivity, an author lives basically a lonely life. I, sit there in front of my keyboard, pounding away on my monitor. Well, pounding on the keyboard and the words appear on the monitor. That's how the tech works. And write things that normally are not consumed for a year or more after I finish them. Publishing lead times are, and now the big 5 New York publishers, and I've been published by 4 out of the 5 of them, their lead times are 2 to 3 years now between when you finish the project and when it's in readers' hands. And I love not just talking about my own work, but debating ideas, talking about science fiction. I just mentioned I was at this conference in Orlando, the International Conference on the Fantastic in the Arts. And it's academics who study science fiction and science fiction and fantasy writers all on spring break in Orlando, hanging out by the pool in the pond. And actually, one of the academics said to me once, "You don't go to too many of the academic sessions here, Rob." And I said, "It's a lot to ask the frog to go to biology class." I sit out by the pool and debate ideas with people who want to have a conversation. I don't want to go in there and hear you dissect my work or somebody else's work, especially when we have to just sit on our hands and listen to your dissection rather than being any kind of interactivity. There's a conceit in academia, which is that the author is no more an expert on what's on the printed page than anybody else who encounters the text. And Woody Allen, you would have thought, put that to rest many years ago. I think it's in Annie Hall when they're standing in line and there's the guy in front who's pontificating about what Marshall McLuhan meant by the medium is the message and so forth. And Woody Allen's character says, "Oh, really? Because I have Marshall McLuhan right here." And McLuhan comes in and tells the guy he's full of beans. The author is, in fact, the world's foremost authority on what they intended, what the words mean, and academics who want to come along and say, "No, I read this." And then, I once actually was at an academic conference. There was one devoted to my work at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario. I went to one of the paper sessions where one person was doing a paper, and it was a grad student. I felt bad for the grad student, and I also felt compelled because she would say, "See, and this says this." And I say, "Yes, but you left out the line before. And you also failed to note that the line is echoed, 4 chapters later. And you're unaware of the fact that the line, in fact, is a resonance for something that Helen Keller said because the book she was talking about was a book about a blind character in The Story of My Life." And, I quite rightly tore her apart, unfortunately, in front of her thesis supervisor. But these things happen. But in general, you don't go to the academic sessions. You don't, there have been PhD theses written on my books. I've got some of the dissertations. I've never read them. I don't care because it's not interactive. But interactively, I'm happy to talk to you, fine gentlemen, Colin and Phil. I'm happy. I love going to science fiction conventions, which are the great leveler. Readers, writers, pros, editors, fans, we're all just hanging around the bar or in the convention hospitality suite and just talking about the ideas. And that's what I love about the culture of science fiction.
Robert J. Sawyer there, having a go at inattentive academics. I'm not sure that if he knew that I'm an academic. In fact, I've met him once or twice at academic conferences, but I don't think he would remember me from those. What did you think of the discussion of Oppenheimer?
You've mentioned that book in the past, and it's on my to-do reading list. And after hearing the author talk about it, I'm even more excited.
I think it is. It's a lot more. It pays much more attention to detail than the film Oppenheimer does. And I think in a way, it's quite appropriate that he called his novel The Oppenheimer Alternative. I think some people might think that it's written in response to the film.
Oh.
But he actually wrote it long before the film was conceived.
I'm known as the guy that likes canonicity and accuracy. And so I like that he does all that research to learn about the people that he's going to eventually write about.
Oh, yeah. I think that's terrific. Especially when it's based on something that is historically significant. You can write about general events in the past. You can have time travelers going back to medieval times, and you can write in vague terms about how people dressed and what they ate and how trade and commerce worked in medieval times. And you can do that from cursory research. But he chose to write the Oppenheimer Alternative with a cast of characters, all of whom are known, all of whom have had biographies written about them. And he, rather than just ignore the inconvenient truths in their real life story, he embraced them, and he looked for loopholes. He looked for strange things that those characters said that allowed him to go off on a flight of fancy in the science fiction part of the book. And it's good to hear him talk about it.
Yeah. I've mentioned in the past how I follow several of my favorite science fiction authors on social media, and they take advantage of the fact that people follow them, because every once in a while somebody will wing out a question saying, if you're a specialist in Australian entomology, can you please reach out to me because I have some questions for you? Or I think Mary Robinette Cole is famous for having an interview with astronauts about how difficult it is to use the restroom in outer space.
And people say, "Oh, that's science fiction. It's just all made up."
over the weekend, I drove down to my mom's house with my sons to help her do some chores and do things down there. And to help pass the time, I asked the question, is The Martian by Andy Weir really science fiction? And, because we had just done the episode about gatekeeping and fandom, I explained, The Martian doesn't seem to have any gigantic science fiction ideas in it, except for maybe one that I could think of, and that is the will of the United States to go to Mars. There's no new technology. It's just about the going, and there's some hand wavy things about science that helps the story move along, but there's not a lot of science fiction. And so we talked about that for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
It was tons of fun.
I'm sure it was. Shall we do a quiz?
Yes, this month's quiz is particularly topical based on who our guest was.
Okay.
So it turns out in 2006, Rob Sawyer was the judge for a science fiction episode of a show that I had never heard of called The Collector's Showdown. Have you heard of it?
No, I don't think I have. No.
Well, like a lot of things that Rob does, it's based out of Canada from Toronto.
Of course, yeah.
And it was filmed at a place called Back of Phoenix Books, which I'm guessing is a science fiction bookstore, maybe like Powell's bookstore that I would know of.
Yeah.
But he has a whole series of questions, more than we'll have time to do today. So I have picked 5 that are all Star Trek related, because I know that you're a Star Trek fan.
Okay.
Are you ready for this?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Let's see.
To be honest, the first one is not Star Trek related, but I think you'll enjoy this one.
Okay.
The #1 best-selling 20th century science fiction novel has been filmed twice now. What's its title and who wrote it?
20th century, filmed twice. Mm-hmm. And you say this question is from 2006.
It is.
So it's something that was filmed before 2006, twice. I can think of something that was filmed 3 times. Oh, I can think of I can think of several that have been filmed 3 times. And I'm thinking The Midwich Cuckoos has been adapted on 3 occasions, I believe. And I Am Legend, which some people would say is horror or fantasy, but I say it's science fiction. That's been filmed, I think, 3 times by 2006. The War of the Worlds. No, that's not 20th century.
Do you want a hint?
I do.
If you asked this question this year, the answer would actually be 3.5 or 4 times.
Oh my goodness. Is it Dune?
It is Dune. Yeah, I was trying to figure out, well, it came in 2 sections, and so is that 1 filming, but I think there were 2 filming sessions, so let's just call it, a bonus or 2.
Okay.
Okay. What is Captain Kirk's brother's name? In his brief on-screen appearance, who played him?
I think he's called Samuel, or Sam. And I think he was played by a little-known Canadian actor called William Shatner.
Those are both correct.
Hey.
In Star Trek Enterprise, the Enterprise was the first ever human-built Warp-5 capable starship. What was its serial number?
Oh. Now, I think it began with NX rather than NCC. And since it was the first one, I'm going to guess it was NX01.
That's correct.
Oh!
Very good. Next one. On Star Trek, Spock was half human and half Vulcan. What was his father's name? What was his mother's name? And what was his half-brother's name?
Oh my goodness. Spock's father was called Sarek, or Sarek, depending on how you pronounce it. Spock's mother's name was Amanda. And what was the other one? A half-brother.
Half-brother.
That would be Cybok from Star Trek V.
Right on.
Hey.
And for a bonus half point, what actor played Spock's father in Star Trek the original series?
Mark Leonard.
Very good. On Star Trek, what starship was commanded by Commodore Decker?
Oh. I know the episode. That was the Doomsday Machine. And that was written by Norman Spinrad, who is a famous science fiction writer. I don't know for sure what the ship was. I have a feeling it was either the Constellation or the Constitution. And I'm going to guess the Constellation.
That is correct.
Oh, lucky guess.
What starship was commanded by Captain Decker?
Captain Decker commanded the USS Enterprise in Star Trek the Motion Picture, but only for about 10 minutes, and then Shatner turned up and took over.
Very good. In which of the Star Trek motion pictures did we learn that Kirk's middle name is Tiberius? Which Canadian actor revealed that?
Canadian actor. Well, now it's funny because I'd always thought that Tiberius was known as his middle name for forever, but I gather that it wasn't revealed on screen in the original series, but I think the name was bandied about behind the scenes for a while, and I think it turned up in some Star Trek fiction before it turned up in a film. But you're telling me that it was first revealed in a film by a Canadian actor. Was it revealed by William Shatner, I'm wondering? Or was this some other actor? I'm going to guess it's some other actor. I'm going to guess Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, has a Klingon played by a famous Canadian actor who is possibly also best known for being in The Sound of Music, and he's called Christopher Plummer.
Yes.
He's Canadian. So that's my guess.
Those are all correct.
Took me a long time to get there, but it all came out in the end.
So we're going to switch science fiction stories now to a little bit of Star Wars.
Oh my goodness. This is where I meet my downfall.
Okay, we'll plumb the depths of your knowledge. In Star Wars, the Empire relied on little one-person ships called TIE fighters. What does TIE, T-I-E, stand for?
Oh my goodness. I honestly didn't know that it stood for anything. So now I'm going to get all the Star Wars fans writing in and saying, "How dare you present a science fiction podcast?" No, I have no idea.
It's twin ion engine.
Oh, is that all? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and to be honest, I tried to think of where that's revealed, and I think it's actually it's not in any of the movies. It's in the books that accompany those.
Ah, okay. So it may not even be canon.
True. Mm-hmm. Well, 2006. That's true. It might not be canon because so much of the canon was thrown away when Lucasfilm was bought out.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, this is a good one. In what film do we hear the line, "So this is how liberty dies," to thunderous applause?
This is how liberty dies, to thunderous applause. Is that part of the line, to thunderous applause?
Yes.
This is how liberty dies, to thunderous applause. And this question is from 2006?
Yes.
I was tempted to say it's somewhere in the Hunger Games, but obviously that's far later. Is it The Running Man?
No, it is not.
I don't know.
This is from Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And it's the scene where they grant Palpatine Emperor-level powers in order to try and stop the war.
Right. Okay.
And, Padme is there because she's a senator watching this travesty of government happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do associate that trilogy of Star Wars films. I do associate that with meetings of the Senate and treaty negotiations and all sorts of admin rather than anything truly dramatic happening.
Last question. Who are Cy Snoodles, Max Rebo, and Droopy McCool?
Oh my goodness. Droopy McCool?
Droopy McCool.
Give me the first two again.
Cy Snoodles, Max Rebo.
These sound like they must be cartoon characters of some kind. But what are they from? Can I have a hint?
It's definitely a Star Wars movie.
Oh.
Made before 2006.
Is it a movie or is it a holiday special?
It is a movie. He's not being that esoteric.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to guess these are from The Phantom Menace.
No, it's earlier than that. They are members of the band from Return of the Jedi.
Oh, okay. Is that actually mentioned on screen? Is this canon?
It would not be mentioned on screen, but anybody who had a Sears catalog from that era would have known the name of every one of them. And that's what I have for you today.
Fantastic. I don't dare ask what the score was.
Oh, I mean, on Star Trek, you were 100%. Got every question right.
Yes.
And obviously, you need to spend a little more time watching Star Wars, but that's
No.
okay. Star Wars isn't for everybody.
Oh, dear.
Star Trek isn't for everybody. You know,
No.
we're science fiction fans and we do what we want.
That's right, yes. So thank you for your quiz.
Oh, and extra thank you to Robert J. Sawyer for the quiz.
Oh, of course, yes. You ready for past, present, and future?
I am.
Do you have a past item?
I have spent so much time seeing films at the OMSI Science Fiction Film Festival. This one is a subtitled Russian science fiction film adapted from the book Roadside Picnic. And the author of that book is escaping me right now.
Is it the Strugatskys?
Ooh, that sounds right.
And is the film called... Is it Stalker?
It is.
Yeah.
James and Seth and I will be covering this work next month, depending on what month you listen to this. And that's why I was initially really excited about the film festival. It's giving us access to works that we never had before.
Oh, yeah. That's really good. Yes, I've seen that. I saw it a number of years ago. It's probably a number of decades ago at this point. And I think I've only ever seen it once. And it had some memorable moments, but it's not one of those films that I ever felt that I needed to go back and watch again. I mean, it's good, but it's not a repeat viewing film for me. But I've never read the book, so that'll be interesting to see what you make of that. I have a present item here, although it starts off sounding as if it's a past item. I'm going to read you a quotation, and in fact I can make this into a mini quiz and see if you recognise where this is from. So here's the quotation. Behind every man now alive stand 30 ghosts, for that is the ratio by which the dead outnumber the living. Since the dawn of time, roughly 100 billion human beings have walked the planet Earth. So do you recognise that?
I do.
It's the opening line, or paragraph, of a book by Arthur C. Clarke, made into a film.
Childhood's End?
Nope, the other one.
2001.
Yeah, 2001. So that's the beginning paragraph of 2001. It's also used by Clarke as a kind of an epigram at the beginning of his book, The Lost Worlds of 2001, which is a sort of a scrapbook of deleted script pages and that sort of thing. Now, that quotation, I've always wondered whether that is true, whether the dead do really outnumber the living by whatever he said, 30 to 1, and whether 100 billion human beings have really lived on the Earth. I've always wondered, is it true? And if it is true, how did he know? How did Clarke know this? Where did he get the information from? Well, I still don't know how he knew or where he got the information from. But it turns out that it is true, and I know that it's true because there's a BBC radio series, a factual documentary series called Crowd Science, where people write in with questions and then the makers of the show investigate. And somebody wrote in and said, how many people have ever lived? So they investigate this and they go and talk to various experts, and all of the experts admit, well, there's lots of estimation involved here because, for example, we don't know how many people were on the Earth in Roman times. We know roughly how many people were alive in the Roman Empire, but the Roman Empire was only part of the world. We don't know how many people were in let's say, North America, South America, Africa, Australia, and so on and so on. Anyway, they talk to experts from different fields, and they come to a conclusion of how many people have ever lived. And the answer is very close to Clarke's figure of 100 billion human beings. So I still don't know how Arthur C. Clarke knew that, but it seems to be a reasonably true statement at the beginning of 2001, which I think is remarkable because, that's science fiction. They just make it up.
Yeah, they never do any research.
That's right. Do you have any more items?
No, it was a short month for me. Like I said, lots of movie watching.
Well, I've got one future item, and it's one of those self-serving things. I'm, as I've mentioned previously on the show, I'm in an online drama group called Planet Zoom Players, and I suppose it was last year now, we did an H.G. Wells story, and we're now working on our next production, which is Terror Out of Space by Lee Brackett. Oh. So this is a pulp science fiction story from, I guess, the late 1930s, something like that. And so we're doing that as an audio performance, and I'll be doing some visualization to go with it and some audio effects to go with it. God knows how long it's going to take us to produce, but we're working on it now. Are we done, Colin?
I think we are, Phil.
I think we're well and truly done. So thanks for listening, folks. Thanks once again to Robert J. Sawyer for joining us for that interview, and of course we hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as we enjoyed recording it. So thanks for listening. We're Phil Nichols and Colin Cuskey. Our theme tune is from Purple Planet at purpleplanet.com. Check out the show notes at 101sf.blogspot.com and give us one of those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. You can also, on our website, buy us a coffee. So that's it for now. See you next time.